Hello everyone, very good evening. I am Dr.Rajib Biswas. I am from Bangladesh. I am a master's student at AUSN and also an intern doctor in a medical college hospital in Bangladesh. So, the word sex is most often considered as a dirty word. And discussion about sex, really? Am I out of my mind? Am I really going to discuss about something which is considered as a taboo in most of the part of the world? Really, I'm going to discuss about it. So, wish me luck. So, my topics here is ethics and necessity of sex education among children. What is sex education? What do you think? What is sex education? Is it really necessary to discuss about it? Let's find out. But first, please, anyone, can you tell me what do you think? What sex education means? Can anyone please tell me their reflection about sex education, understanding, anything? Anyone, please? Okay, I think.
What's sex
Oh,
education?
sure.
Please. Sociology and health major.
I think sex education is something which is very important in today's life because most of us don't have any idea about it. As an adult, as a children, it is very important for us to learn about it. So,
Thank you very much.
I think you
Yeah.
brought us.
Yeah, I'm not going to say whether you're right or wrong, but let's find out. But first, let me tell you a story. There was a girl who, in the school bathroom, was crying and cutting her vulva, that is the outermost part of the vagina, because she got bleeding. So all of her friends went in the washroom and saw that she's crying, and it was a very devastating moment for her. So she asked, "Why are you crying?" She replied that blood is coming out of my urethra, and I don't know why am I sick or I'm going to die. All of my friends said that if you are bleeding from your urethra, you're going to die. So I am trying to cut it off. Maybe I'll not die if it's not with my body. So this is not a story. This is a real life situation, and this, you may all know very well, has happened to many of us. There are many misconceptions lurking around, and we know what is right and what is wrong. We don't have any idea about sexuality, about growing into puberty, and all we know from this behind the school buses, from the outsiders, and they are not right all the time. So this is not a story. So I think this happens when a chimpanzee tries to teach you quantum physics and biology, So learning nothing would be better than learning that. Okay. So why are these misconceptions lurking around? Kids these days know who is the uncle of the mother of the grandfather of the cousin of the great Alexander, but they don't know how a child is born. They don't know about menstruation. Why? It clearly indicates that there is a gap between the sexuality and their understanding. So for most of the time, we assume that everyone assumes that they will know it all by themselves. But how many of you honestly discuss about sexuality with your children? Like sexuality, intimacy, relationship, sexual behavior. This number is very few. So it's clear that we are so prudish that we the whole would rather allow pedophiles to access our children than to teach our children what is appropriate. What young children and adults are supposed to do when parents and caregivers either refuse or are afraid to unable to discuss about this matter, and sometimes even worse, they don't even are aware of the facts and spread false information. Your children will find it one way or another. So, would you rather have them find out from a friend who have X-rated magazines, or a peer that have no idea about what the facts are? Sexual education happens whether you know it or not. How much better to take the charge of the process by reflecting our own attitude about sexuality, considering what we want really, like in our children, to think and feel about sex, and then coaxing ourselves to tell them. As parents and educators, we should want to be the first and best source of the education. If not us, they'll get it by television, from movies, from pornography, and what they hear about in the back of the seat of the school bus. So, what's the role of the school here? School can augment the what children had learned from home, and combat misinformation learned from peers or found on internet. But let me ask you something. Is this the job of the teacher in the school to educate students about sexuality, or is it the job of the parents? I know you have many arguments, but there are parents who find it not comfortable to discuss about sexuality with their children, and there are teachers who don't think that this is their job, and there are also some parents who don't think that this should even be taught. So who to blame now? Parents are saying it's not their job, teachers are saying it's not their job, then who to believe? But most often, parents are the children's first sex education teachers. The first time a parent's name the parts of the body, including the genitalia to a toddler, preschooler, sex education has begun. So, it can also begin when a child asks some very difficult to answer questions like, Mom, here you can see in the picture that the boy is saying, Mom, am I store-bought or homemade? And in the another picture, the boy is saying, do we ever serve chocolate milk? These are really difficult to answer questions. But sometimes, most of the time what happens, we just ignore these kind of questions or give some false information or make some explanation that is not relevant or not associated with the main facts, and the children is going to learn nothing from here. So it's not the action of the parents only. So what is the position of the school here? The process of value development begins earlier in the childhood and goes throughout the life, whether school does anything about it or not. But the school is uniquely placed to influence the process in the development by providing suitable opportunities for discussion, reflection, and increasing understanding. In particular, their role is to uphold the values of the broader society, especially where these have learned through open debate and democratic search. So I guess you all will agree that this is the responsibility of both the parents and the teacher. But let's not draw our conclusion here. Discuss some of the more issues. At first, what children should learn and when they should learn it. This is a very difficult to answer question because you are not going to discuss about the process of sex in a toddler. You are not going to discuss what the parts of the body are to a 8th grader. So when should they know and what should children know? So here you can see in a survey of Turkey that most of the parents think that the sex education should be provided. It is necessary and it should be started from around 7 to 12 years, and most of them agree that parents should be their sex educator. And you know, at the last point, you can see that did you receive training on sex education before? Most of them say no. Even though we think that parents should be the first teacher of sex education, most of the time, even they don't have any education. So here are some other questions. I would like to suggest see the last one. Which topics did you talk with your child? You know, they talk about bodily difference between genders. They talk about pregnancy and birth and reproduction. But you see the masturbation and sexual abuse. Most of the parents don't even want to talk about it. But you know, sexual abuse is a major issue. Even for it's like a global issue. So they don't aware their child about sexual abuse. So what the educators say about when should we start sex education? They say that sex education start it early and definitely before puberty. The earlier we start talking with children about sexuality, even our very youngest, the better, because that will only increase our chance of continuing the conversation about sexual health with them throughout their growing up years, all the way through their puberty and adolescence. So, you know, but most of the people of the developing countries don't have sexual education or have very little sexual education. Does that mean that they are sexually ignorant? Technically, yes, they are sexually ignorant. Here you can see that Batman doesn't have any condom. He's having all the amazing things, but no condom, because even adults have no or very little sexual education. So, for goodness sake, children, let the children have their innocence, shouldn't they? Why should a kindergarten children need to know about sex? Why even a 5th grader need to know about sex? Well, why would they know about how many planets are there in the solar system? Why do they even need to know who was at the first Thanksgiving? Because sex education is unlike calculus. You need it all through your life. But we have concerns that maybe have already arisen in your mind. One of the biggest fear here, teaching young people about sex will cause them have sex. But is it true that if you are teaching students about sex will make them have more sex? So let's find out with some research here. you can see here that with a comprehensive sex education, they are less likely, significantly less likely to report teen pregnancies, and who received no formal education. And here you can also see that abstinence only sex education. There are sex education where on side you can teach that abstinence is only way, and where they teach that with abstinence. So where abstinence only education does not reduce the likelihood of having vaginal intercourse. So comprehensive education have really impacted here and marginalized the association of lower likelihood of having engagement in vaginal intercourse. So I think this is an irrational fear, because withholding information about sex and sexuality will not keep them safe. It will only keep them ignorant. If teaching about sex makes that students have more sex, will teaching about them about revolutionary war will make them more violent? Of course not. Here you can see in this table that abstinence plus education and abstinence on education, what's the difference between them? Both of them promotes abstinence from sex, but in the abstinence plus sex education, they acknowledge that teenagers may have sex. Maybe they are currently sexually active, and they promote teaching of using contraceptions, condom use, and abortion, sexually transmitted diseases. But in abstinence only education, they think that teachers will not have sex until they are married. So they don't talk about contraception or condom use. They don't even talk about abortion, HIV, or any other topic. So consider this topic. If a girl is being raped or being abused, she will feel like she is out of the society, because they are promoting that you are never, you don't have to, will not have sex until you are married. But what happens if this sex is not with your consent? Would you feel that you are out of the society? Would you feel that you are not valuable? Would you feel that your life is just a mess? So that happens when abstinence only education is promoted in the country. So the fact is, just like any other topic taught in school, if sexual education is developmentally appropriate, sequential, and complete, this education will be the foundation for helping them to become sexually healthy adults. So there is nothing to be feared of. Then what should we do now? Here are some guidelines for the parents that they can follow. That when talking to your kids about sex, make sure the conversation is age appropriate. There are some guidelines what to tell and when to tell. There is a long list of things that you want to tell them. If you are interested, you can contact me and I can send you the list. And then you have to explain things in a way that your children can understand given their age. Every children is different, but there is a rough guideline that what children should be able to understand at what age. So that's what I am talking about. Example, younger kids are more interested in pregnancy and babies rather than the act of sex. And this is a rough guideline for the schools. Early elementary school students need to learn proper names of their bodies, difference between good touch and bad touch, and the way they can be a good friend. This may be the foundation for their intimate relationship in their later life. And 4th and 5th graders need to know information about puberty because they are changing their body, their internet safety, harmful impact of bullying. 7th and 8th, 9th graders are ready for information about body image, reproduction, abstinence, contraception, HIV, and disease prevention, communication, and the most important, want to learn about topics, healthy relationship. But you know, if you think that these all things can be done in the setup of parents, but that's not true. There are some distinct roles school can play, but as a parent you may not. Maybe these are 3 distinct roles. They are school can reflect the values of the society and the kind of society we want to be. School fill in the gap in students' knowledge and understanding, including the knowledge of importance of values. And school can encourage children to choose a rational path through the variety of influence that impregnate in their experience. So let me go here quickly. So this is a common scenario. If there is a sex education in your curriculum, that's good, but what happens when you can see in this picture there is no one in the class? From my experience, I can say that in my school we have a curriculum that is there is sex education from class 6th grade, and there is just 2 pages of information, and that is not even complete. And most of the time teachers don't even go on that page any time in their total curriculum, and it's like a never to touch page that you will get destroyed if you touch this page, and teachers don't want to teach them at all. And sometimes teachers feel that why is this page included in this book? So this is a common scenario. So teachers don't feel comfortable to teach sex education in school. What's the reason behind this? You can say there are some distinct reasons, like they may feel embarrassed talking about such powerful emotion. They may feel it is private matter where they have no right or intrude on people's lives. They may find it hard to do justice to the wide range of cultural perspective on love, or they may feel that love doesn't lend itself to rational discussion. So these are some of the important points why teachers don't even want to teach about sex education in the class. So I haven't yet completed any research on it, but I am intending and planning my research to do on this topic, and I would like to search for some of the questions I have addressed here, like do they think that is it necessary to provide sex education for children, or at what age do we think that sex education should be started, and who should be providing sex education for the children, and who is providing the sex education, is it trained or not, and if he is trained or she is trained, from where she got the training program, and some of the questions like this. But here are some rough guidelines how the curriculum of the school should be from the previous researches. Like the class should focus not only on the biology aspect of the heavily biology aspect, but also heavily on trust, respect, and how to comprises a healthy relationship or friendship. Students should be able to open up and ask questions without fear or ridicule. You know, there was a research conducted by Times magazine they just gave papers to the kindergarten children and told them to write questions what come in their mind about sexuality. So there are different kind of questions and they are diverse, like when do I get to have sex, and why is my penis is like this one, and like this kind of questions arises when they are their child. But what parents tell them that you are not supposed to think about this at all, you are not supposed to talk about this at all. But curiosity doesn't suppress. So if parents are not telling, they will learn it from someone who is not even aware of the facts that this can harm their life, and this misinformation can lead to have so many problems that in the future life they will be affected. So the curriculum should also have emphasis on age-appropriate instruction and medically accurate, comprehensive sexual health education for all students in public schools. They need to answer to what if I do or don't fit a girl or boy. This is a question of transgender that will be discussed by my next presentator, Bhaiya. And there are lots of transgenders, boys and girls. Maybe I say transgenders, but they don't feel fit in the community. So the curriculum should also include what if they don't fit girl or boy, and about the puberty information for boys and girls. And so at the first I asked a question, what do you think about sex education? So I think what the characteristics of a sex education person would be. If you can answer this question, you can get the definition of sex education. If you know what the characteristics of a sexually educated person would be, you will be able to define what is sex education. So I'll skip it because it's a long way. And finally, sex education is more than the study of human sexuality or in a biology or social science course. The aim of the study of human sexuality is for students to come to know more about sex, whereas the aim of sex education extends beyond this, and this includes encouraging certain kinds of skills, attitudes, dispositions, behavior, and critical reflection on the personal experience. So in the broader sense, this is sex education. And thank you everyone. If you have any suggestion or query on my research project that I'm going to conduct shortly, you can email me or contact me through my website. And thank you everyone.
Thank you, Rajib. Good. Are there any comments or questions? Suggestions?
I don't want to worry Rajib.
Sorry, please.
Yes,
go ahead.
Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting. It's not something, like you say, people want to openly talk about. And I think sometimes it's because of the way we talk about it. When you first encounter discussions on sex education, you don't have your mother sitting down with you and saying, I want to talk to you about sex education. The terminology that we sometimes use, and even the one that you're proposing to use in your research, might be very critical for you to get the kind of information that you're getting. So even like you're saying, in the school, the teacher has written their sex ed, or in the textbook, it's written sex education. Nobody wants to touch that page. It might have more to do with the concept and how that word and what the terminology means. But if you use something that was more relevant to the person, not just terminology, but social practices or things that are familiar to us. I'm using an example from the First Nations, the Mohawk community where they try to teach things like you've mentioned, permission, respect, safety. And the way they're doing it at, age appropriateness, you also mentioned, was by taking children to take seeds and plant into the soil, and also make little molds of women's bodies and, in the soil, and being able to teach this thing of reproductive health through that type of mechanism. They also use proverbs and stories about showing how to respect your own body before you even respect someone else. So if you can respect your own, you might most likely to respect someone else. There's also that family relationships between a mother and child. And there are traditional ceremonies that sometimes are prevalent amongst communities that may have been, marginalized for whatever reason due to modernization and things like that. But so I know in this particular one, they were talking about where the mothers are sewing. They're teaching a skill of sewing, or using the skill of sewing little like pouches that look like the uterus. And the children or the young girls are learning about what is a uterus and all the anatomical things. So we may be able to ask what is age appropriate, but for a young girl who might be 5 or not even yet to hit puberty, is learning about what is a uterus and that is on the inside of me, so that when I get to my menstrual cycle, I'm not confused about what is going on. But it's taught in such an indirect way that, through sewing. I mean, I don't know how to sew a button myself, but how to sew is it's linked in that way. The other thing, like traditions and ceremonies, looking at and revering the moon, the natural elements. And by revering the moon and understanding the moon cycle, I'm able to understand my menstrual cycle also. And I'm able to explain that my cycle may not be 28 days, may not be 30 days. I'm skipped mine. And now I can go and ask Mom, what is the story? And even the other thing about terminology I missed was, you mentioned towards the end something about, identity as either a boy or a girl. And I think our next speaker is going to talk about transgender. There are some communities and languages which have more words than even English has to describe some of these sexual orientations long before we even started talking about them openly in English. So to explore those things from a less, I don't know, I'm just talking about your research questions and the way you maybe position or phrase them might give you different type of results that you're looking for. But yeah, that's my contribution. I don't know, Prof. Daryl?
Good. Thank you very much, and I will consider these questions. And
Thank you. No problem.
yeah, and what you have said that in a broader sense, if you are teaching this with some other things like you mentioned about moon cycle, you mentioned about swing, but this kind of things need to be very intensive, and it's a broader project. But in countries like Bangladesh or India, or maybe I don't know about Nepal, but there this kind of broader course and should usually is not that much possible, because teachers and students are not that much in contact with them in a year curriculum year. So maybe if you are trying to teach just about reproductive health, that would be enough. But if you are combining them with other subjects, the teacher would not be that kind of interested to teach about this kind of reproductive health in this kind of broader course. So this is one of the many problems.
I think maybe I want to answer that in one way. And I understand that challenge, because even in South Africa we have, in most countries anyway, you have like a multicultural classroom. We're all sitting here and we're from different backgrounds. So if you start talking about sewing a little thing with trying to teach the uterus or the moon, it's not going to be relevant to me because I'm not from that cultural background. And the teacher might even feel uncomfortable because you don't know yourself what is the value or the cultural background to this way of teaching. So one of the ways that we are promoting as an indigenous knowledge sort of systems way is to bring the practitioner themselves, the person from outside the classroom, the mother that knows about this thing, into the classroom, and we get to engage. And if that's my mom, I'm suddenly proud of that. And I suddenly take ownership of reproductive health. I suddenly become more aware, and I'm able to have that instilled in me. I want to use an example, Prof, about the reed dance, where we have Zulu girls who are not yet, married and things like that, who are bare-chested and go to visit the king. And it kind of brings this topic about why have we suddenly sexualized certain, parts of our anatomy when it actually doesn't, maybe in some cultures, serve that purpose. So you gave that example, I was laughing at that one, that you give chocolate milk, at least it was kids. But you notice that sometimes the main person that's responsible for that was woman. Almost every picture you put there was a mom.
Yeah.
But religion is a most important in our country.
Yes.
And the Bengali culture is not permitted these teachers to teach the children.
Okay.
So that's a problem, and many child and adolescent girl also completed when they came hospital. So also when free to doctors and relationship friends and patient relationship doctors, they told it's a problem, or sometimes they bite and also the fight. So that's why it's a problem in here, because they didn't know how to this protect. So that's a problem. And also family relationship also problem for education, this regarding sex education.
Okay.
So Rajib is a very good thing. It's so many Bengali cultures so we feel shy and also talk each other for friends and also home. So very nice topic. Thank you, Rajib.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Rajib.
Here I want to make one point about India. If we see in ancient India, in India we used to have sex temple. I'll tell you, there is a place in India called Khajuraho. Professor is here. In Khajuraho we have a place. There is we call it a sex temple. Like there are whole, images of different positions of sex are shown all over the wall of the temple. And there are many few more temples like this all over the India in ancient time, when we have no terminology in English word. Then at that time our culture, our religion used to have such liberal thoughts. Now I want to ask you or present here that what happened now. I can say that now we are free, but our mind become colonized now.
Yes.
Because at that time, and I tell you, in Nepal, where people are here, Lord Shiva is very famous. In our culture, we used to say Lord Shiva Ardhanareshwar. You understand this word? Ardhanareshwar mean a person with both man, half woman. So I want to understand with you people that coming from a land of such liberal thoughts, where we used to openly discuss, openly have character. Like if you go to Khajuraho temple, you can see the photos, images that you can't even imagine. Such has been shown at that time. And now in 21st century, we are afraid of taking the word sex. If we say openly sex, it becomes taboo. So what happened now? And what is its effect? Why it's happened? Or if anybody can explain.
I have an opinion. So I think that the word sex has became so at least considered dirty or shady.
Yes.
It's linked to negative things around sex, like child pornography, prostitution, rape, child abuse, and things like premarital sex may be not their accepted concept in different cultures. So I think it depends when you teach sex education, in the curriculum, what are you teaching to whom, when? But then it becomes personal issue because of the reasons, but it's very political issue at the same time because we consume these images about sex, and they are very bad these days. Then it gets also complicated because when you say, okay, sex only happens between men and women, but because of the sexual diversity, LGBTQ sexuality, so how do we teach sex education to LGBTQ communities, for example, those who have suffered from sexism or chauvinism, violence? How do we heal the trauma from their experience related to sex violence? I think it's a very complex, we have complex agenda here, so that's why it's difficult to what to put into this curriculum and then present it to this wide audience. So I don't really have the answer for that. How can we organize it? I don't think there's one way to.
Also, I'd like to talk about the fact of sex education, which is not only common in students these days. I think we should broadcast to the adults also, because in today's world where we live in, where I live in, Nepal, India, people have become very kind of vulgar, maybe I would like to say, because of the leading rape cases. We are not allowed to go in public, and then we are not free to talk about it. We are not free for, we don't have equality, because this is a fact. As a girl, I'd like to say we don't have equality, even though we talk about equality a lot, but we tend to see as a backward kind of gender according to the males in society right now. According to, I don't know about the Western world, but it's very, very disheartening in India. And so I'd like to also ask about the sex education. How can we progress in sex educating the adults? Right? Because we know about sex, the adults knows about sex, but then we have to educate them about sex as well in the good term. So that would be my question: the sex education in the adults, I guess. Thank you.
Rajib?
That was one of my concerns also, because if you're teaching a child, and who is teaching the child? Of course, an adult is teaching the child. So, is that adult well taught? Is that adult well educated? Most of the time, they are not. So, I have thought about it, and I think I will address some of the issues here as well. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Quite an interesting discussion. So we can discuss about it, is your conclusion. Thank you very much, Rajib. Okay. Greco, yes?
Can I say something real quick? Okay. How we can teach adults. I am a little wary of globalization. I embrace globalization. I love that we are able to come together here and then discuss different important issues from different perspectives. But at the same time, how you promote globalization, for what purposes, could be misleading. I'm a little worried about their international students in Japan. Not all of them, but some of them are clearly affected by Cool Japan policy. Cool Japan policy is the government-initiated agenda to familiarize people around the world with the Japanese culture. But there's a lot of contents, from anime and comic books. They're very sexualized. They are highly sexualized, and video games as well. How the shape of women, body were portrayed, and so when you think about anime, there's the connection to sexualization of women, and that leads to sexual violence. I think the impact of that's how I think people actually learn about sex and sexual violence rather than from the formal classrooms in schools.
The professor made a very good point. Like how, if we say that sex education, you talk about how we can train them. So I think this is the answer, that modern education has failed to portray sex education in definite way. Because if you see like how women are portrayed in our television, or you listen to the songs, and if I talk about Indian movie or Indian Nepal also, like always try to show women at the low level as compared to men, like showing patriarchy. So does it mean that modern thoughts, or I say this globalization, westernization, is not able to address this issue, and it only created a gap, doesn't wind up, but it created the gap. And we should internally think like what our culture, like someone said that we have to generate indigenous thing, like how we used to do in the past, how our culture used to deal with these things. And every country may have its own, like Japan has its own way of teaching, India may have its own way, Nepal own way, Bangladesh own way. Why we need a universal, like somebody is sitting in the AC room, has set up these guidelines, so you have to read this and then only you can educate the side. Why we need this? So this is also a big question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rajib.
Okay, well, thank you very much to everyone.